that was Hava Nagila by the Jewish Starlight Orchestra. Hava Nagila means let us be happy.
I'm Natasha.
And I'm Julia.
Polonsky, for emphasis.
Polonsky, yes.
It is March 5th at 3:34, and we are filming our podcast on gender roles in Judaism. So, when people talk about gender roles in Judaism, one of the first things I think people need to understand is that it's not just one large group of Judaism. It's multiple branches, mainly Orthodox, Conservative, and Reform Judaism. And all of them all approach topics like gender roles and gender expectations a little differently, while staying true to original texts like the Torah. A lot of the traditional expectations come from Jewish law, which is called the Halakha, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. That law comes from interpretations of the Torah, which is the main Jewish religious text, and later discussions by rabbis that were written down in the Talmud also add a lot of influence onto what many believe today. Historically, Jewish religious life developed in societies that were pretty patriarchal, so that definitely influences how roles between men and women were set up and practiced.
Yup, and that shows up a lot in religious services and rituals.
Right. So in those traditional Jewish practices, men were required to do certain religious commandments, especially ones that happen at specific times, like daily communal prayer. Because of that, men usually led services and read from the Torah in more traditional communities, not women. Women, historically, on the other hand, though, were actually exempt from a lot of these time-specific commandments.
Which doesn't really sound fair at first, but that's not exactly how it was explained, right?
Yeah, it's, in the way we're describing right now, it might make it sound a bit more unfair than it really is. The traditional reasoning was that women were often responsible for running the household and raising kids, which is also just very common in patriarchal societies. We see that a lot in traditional nuclear families in the 1950s, for example. Since those responsibilities don't follow a strict schedule, rabbis argued it wouldn't make sense to require them to show up to prayers that happen at exact times every day. So instead, women were seen as having a different kind of religious role, more centered around the home.
And the home is a really big deal in Judaism religiously.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of Jewish rituals happen in the home, and one famous example is lighting the Shabbat candles, which marks the start of the Sabbath each week. Traditionally, that's been done by women, and it's considered really meaningfully spiritual. So, moving into public religious participation, in a lot of Orthodox communities today, these roles are still mostly the same. Men usually lead prayer services, read from the Torah, and count towards something called the minyan, which is the group of 10 adults needed for certain communal prayers. Women can still go to a synagogue, but they might sit separately from men and usually don't lead mixed gender prayer in more traditional settings, though.
But that's not how it works in every branch of Judaism.
Not at all.
So the three biggest branches in North America are Orthodox, Conservative, and Reform Judaism, and they all interpret these traditions a tad bit differently.
But Orthodox Judaism tends to stick the closest traditional interpretations, right?
Yep. Orthodox communities usually follow halakha really strictly, so the traditional roles for men and women are mostly maintained. But women are still super involved in things like education and community work and keeping family traditions going.
So, what about Conservative Judaism? Is that like the middle of the road between them?
Yep, exactly. Conservative Judaism still respects Jewish law, but it allows more reinterpretation over time. Because of that, women can be counted in the minyan, lead prayer services, and read from the Torah. They also started ordaining female rabbis in the 1950s. The first generally recognized female rabbi is Regina Jonas, and she was ordained in Berlin, Germany in 1935.
That's really cool. And then what about Reform Judaism? Is that usually the most, egalitarian?
Yeah, Reform Judaism started in Europe in the 1800s and focused more on adapting traditions to modern life. In most Reform communities today, men and women participate equally in services and leadership roles. Women can be rabbis, cantors, and basically hold any religious position. Some Reform communities also focus on being inclusive of different gender identities beyond just male and female.
How about marriage and family roles?
In traditional Jewish thought, the family is basically the center of a religious life. A lot of traditions actually happen at home instead of just in the synagogue.
So, Jewish marriages involve something called the ketubah, right?
Yeah, the ketubah is basically a marriage contract, historically outlined the husband's responsibilities towards his wife, like financial support and respect. It was originally meant to protect women legally.
So it's not this binding thing that outsiders might interpret it as. And families are also where traditions get passed down.
Exactly. Parents are expected to teach their kids Jewish values, stories from the Torah, and religious traditions. Education and learning have always been super important in Jewish culture.
So, moving into a more modern perspective, today though, gender roles in Jewish families can look really different depending on the specific branch, location, or community. In many Orthodox families, for example, traditional roles are still really, really important, but women often can pursue careers and higher education as well.
And in conservative and reform communities, responsibilities are usually shared more equally now.
Yeah. A lot of couples split things like work, parenting, and religious traditions pretty evenly. Some families even adapt rituals so both partners can perform those also pretty equally. So, also, why don't we move into education and religious learning? Because that's also really important. Education is a huge part of Jewish culture and religion, and historically, gender differences have existed there as well.
Correcto. Jewish culture has always placed a really big emphasis on studying religious texts like the Torah and the Talmud. Historically, boys were usually expected to study these texts more formally, especially if they were preparing for roles like rabbis or scholars. Girls still received education, but it was often more focused on learning traditions for family and community life.
But what about in more modern times?
Today, women study Jewish texts at really high academic levels, and in many communities, women are scholars, teachers, and religious leaders.
So, what you're saying is it's really important because it shows how gender roles affect access to knowledge and authority in religion.
So, what is this huge party that Jewish kids seem to have?
You're talking about the bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah.
Yeah, when they turn 12 or 13?
So, another place where gender roles show up is exactly those parties. Boys traditionally celebrate a bar mitzvah at age 13, which marks that they become responsible for following religious commandments.
Girls celebrate something similar called a bat mitzvah.
Yeah. The bat mitzvah, on the other hand, is a ceremony that has become more common in the 20th century, especially in conservative and reform communities. Today, many girls read from the Torah and lead parts of the service during their ceremonies.
I didn't really have a bat mitzvah, but I'll tell you, my special gift for my bat mitzvah were AirPods.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So, do you want to talk about, your experience a little bit?
I mean, sure. I'm not religiously Jewish. I am only ethnically Jewish, but we do have a lot of Jewish friends that are practicing. And I went to a really big bar mitzvah when I was 13, because my friend in my class turned 13. And his celebration was huge, dude. It was in a hotel. He had an arcade. We did the chair dance. What's it called?
I know what you're talking about, though.
The chair dance. Is it the hora? Yeah. That was really cool to watch.
Cool. Yeah. And it's gotten a lot more common in more recent years. I mean, it's even entered the mainstream media a bit, the same way, quinceañeras are really big. Adam's, I don't know her name, Adam Sandler's daughter, she came out with a movie on Netflix, I believe, and it was you're not invited to my...
not invited to my bat mitzvah.
That's what, yep. It's become a bigger thing than it has in the past, and especially, bat mitzvahs, because usually it's always been, your bar mitzvah, for 13-year-old boys, but...
Yeah.
It's growing in popularity.
Love to see Jewish representation in media.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm glad that it's starting to become a more common and more mainstream practice. And it always has been, but in a way that outsiders to the community now are a bit more knowledgeable about. So
Yeah, I need to watch that movie.
it's really good, actually. I would recommend it.
Really?
As in, like, a little pastime movie. I don't think it's
Okay.
anything special. It's not
Yeah,
winning awards, but it's something.
Yep.
What about women rabbis, though, getting back on topic?
Yeah. The first woman ordained, as I said, was Regina Jonas.
What about in the U.S., though? Because she was ordained in
Germany.
Yeah.
Yep. First woman ordained as a rabbi in the U.S. was Sally Priesand in 1972 in the Reform movement. And since then, women have become rabbis in Reform and Conservative Judaism, and now they lead many congregations.
But Orthodox Judaism still generally doesn't ordain female rabbis. But there are ongoing conversations about women taking more leadership roles. So there is talk about it, and a lot of that debate that is really crucial in Judaism is being turned towards gender roles and opportunities that especially women are able to achieve. But it's not exactly there in the same way Reforms or Conservative Judaism is.
Yep.
I think to wrap it up a little bit, we'll touch on the concept of modesty.
Yeah, in more traditional Jewish communities, there's also an idea called, I don't know how to pronounce it, but Tzniut? Yeah, which is usually translated as modesty. Spelled Tzniut.
It can influence things like clothing and behavior in the same way ideas of modesty are. We would understand them in the U.S., like dress codes and stuff at like a high school.
Yeah, for example, in some Orthodox communities, women dress modestly by covering their shoulders, knees, or hair after marriage. Men also follow modesty rules like wearing a kippah or dressing conservatively.
Yeah, so I think we've touched on a lot of ways gender roles are expressed differently between branches and just in general.
And how Judaism is not really just one fixed system.
Yeah, it really depends on the community, where people in particular are located, and how people interpret tradition.
And that debate about tradition versus equality is happening in a lot of religions right now.
Exactly. And since debate and interpretation have and will always be a crucial part of Jewish tradition, these conversations are kind of continuing that long history and will be continuing on for as long as we are here. Not just talking, but for as long as hopefully the long time we're all on this earth. It's an ongoing conversation in a lot of religions, so yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I think we're gonna
end it off with a little "Let Us Rejoice."